Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. My mother-in-law prides herself on her cooking. When she makes a dish, she'll turn to me and say, "How is it?" Even as she's asking the question, she knows there's something off. If the dish is spectacular, I will talk endlessly about it. I will go on endlessly about how tasty it is. I'll describe how it tastes, how it feels, and there is no doubt that the food has pushed my greed button for the day. However, when it's not quite as good as it should be at least, I'll stay quiet. The opposite of praise doesn't have to be criticism. It can just be silence. Yet, in most instances, silence is not just creepy but unhelpful. But in our desire to be useful, we tend to give advice, slipping needlessly into criticism. Part of the reason why we're critical is because we haven't quite learned how to praise someone. It feels awkward, especially if the dish is not up to the standard that we're expecting. Yet, there is a way to praise others. There's also a very good reason why you should praise someone. We all remember extreme insults because they're specific in their detail. And that detail, by the way, that's our first clue to how we need to praise. So let's jump into the world of praise and cover 3 aspects. The first, the importance of detail and the duration. The second, how to praise when asked for criticism. And finally, how to ferret out praise when there is nothing much to praise. Let's start out with the first one, which is the importance of detail and the duration. I've been photographing people at work in New Zealand for the past few years. And as you'd expect, if you do a good job, people compliment you. But they never seem to talk much about your work. And in doing so, what they lose out is in the detail. And one of the ways to figure out what this detail means is to listen to this testimonial that came from Sarah. And Sarah is the co-owner of a bakery called Dusty's. And this is what she had to say. "I'm so enjoying the photographs. You capture movement in a rare way. To see the essence of someone's movement in a still, that is so cool. We don't really have a word for it in English, but in Japanese martial arts, they talk about a person's taijutsu, which is more than just how they move when they fight. It's also how they move through life and how they look at life and everything. And that's what I see in your pictures. I hope you come back soon." Now let's compare that comment with most of the other praise that I've received. As you'd expect, most of the other people would have said something like, "Cool photos," "Oh, I love the way you work," or "Oh, that was very nice." You can spot the difference between what Sarah wrote and all the other comments that I've received over time. It's not that I can't remember getting praise, it's just that I can't remember the details. And if you and I can't remember details, it's like a ship in the night. You know there's something out there in the dark, but you can't experience it in all its glory. When you add detail to praise, the other person lights up with their own story. Take, for instance, a jam that someone gave me a few days ago. I wrote to him and I said, "I love the chili jam. The color is so arresting." I had this conversation over chat, and by the time I finished the sentence, he was already typing his own part of the story. "I made another batch in the slow cooker and lost all of the color." He said, "I use red capsicums and red chilies, and I think it was about 3 parts capsicum to 1 part chili by weight." He also told me how he needed to eliminate many of the seeds. Some seeds make the cut, but most are discarded, and my hands stung for days. It was crazy. I would get a few hours of relief, and then my hands would flare up again. Could the conversation have gone another way? A more truncated, shorter, not filled with detail way? Of course it could. I could have said something like, "That jam was cool." And he would have said thanks, and that would be the end of the conversation. But it didn't take much to get him going down the track of telling me what he'd done to get that rich color. I still hadn't talked to him about the taste, which I followed up with later. However, staying on that one point mattered. When Sarah from the bakery stayed on how I was getting movement in my photos, I realized something that I had not seen in my work before. And even if I had seen it before, it would have reinforced the fact that I was doing something correctly or well. The same concept applied to the discussion of the color of that jam. You don't know it, but he'd given me 3 jars of different jams. And if I tried to praise all of the 3 jams, there wouldn't be enough detail. I'd have never learned how his hands stung for days, or that he didn't make 20 jars but just 6, one of which he gave me. When you're praising someone, the detail is essential. Granted, a quick like is often acknowledging someone's work. A wow or "that's cool" suggests that you appreciate what you're experiencing. However, the details are what people want to hear. They want to relive what they've gone through, to design their living room, to bake a cake. But even details in a single photo matter. With detail, duration usually follows. It sounds like duration is a separate concept, but it's not. While picking a single point is great, you want that point to linger. If you're writing to someone, write 5 or 6 lines, maybe even a little over a paragraph. If you're chatting with someone or in front of them, dig deeper into that point. You want that feeling to linger, and it does. And you know that you've gone about it the right way because the other person will tell you things that almost no one else knows. They will start to tell you a story about the ups and downs, and the details, they get details back. But if you say cool, the other person's comment is almost as brief. Their answer is thanks. To me, that feels like a thud. It's one moment of this and that, and then it's gone. Go for the detail and go for duration instead, and then wait for the story to unfold. And it's wonderful when you have to give praise, and the praise is more than evident, but there are times when you are called to give an appraisal. You have to bite your lip because the person is asking you to somehow give them constructive criticism, but wants praise. It's a problem we all face when talking to friends, partners, or even kids. The usual answer to this question is to make a sandwich of praise. You say a good thing, a not so good thing, and then another good thing. And that sounds nice, except when you have 5 not so good comments to make. What do we do? Let's find out. Why is the criticism sandwich so frequently quoted? The biggest reason is that it seems to soften the blow, and yet it doesn't. There are 2 reasons why it doesn't work as well as most people think. When you're being critical, the other person is already on the defensive. They want to hear what's wrong, but they prefer not to get any critical appraisal. Hence, the main factor is either balance or imbalance. Imbalance sounds a lot like the criticism sandwich. You say 2 good things and then one sad little thing in the middle. However, if you've got 3 bad things to say, that sandwich quickly turns rancid. You have to have balance. If you have 3 not so good things to say, then you must have 3 good things to say as well. It has to balance. The balance or imbalance is not about having more criticism than praise or more praise than criticism. It's a matter of ratios. 1 part criticism, 1 part praise. 5 parts criticism, 5 parts praise. This sandwich business of trying to smoothen things out, trying to make it less bumpy, that's not so great. Because eventually, one point, a single point where things went wrong, and then where things went spectacularly well, that's what a person can handle. Too many points and they're flailing around. They don't know what to do. We think that we've got 5 points of criticism, so let's go with it. But they don't want to hear it. Most people don't want. There are exceptions. If you do a course with us, like the storytelling course, for example, it's not unusual for clients to provide almost 500 to 1,000 words of feedback. When such critical appraisal is underlined, there's no need to hold back. However, in most cases, people want praise. They just want praise. They really want praise. And you have to remember that they want praise. When people come back to you for more feedback, it means that you're praising them often enough. Think about that line for a while. They're coming back because they want more praise. And the best balance of all is just the 1-to-1 ratio. Just tell them what they can fix and then give them the praise that they want. And this brings us to the end of the second section. What did we cover so far? The first thing that we covered was this concept of praise in detail and duration. And that's very crucial because the more you go into detail, the more other people open up and tell you stories. And that's how you know that you're praising them well. The second point was why people come back to you for more feedback. And that is because you're giving them praise. You're keeping that ratio of one little bit of something to fix and then one big voluminous amount of praise. And they see that as balanced. That's the balance that you're seeking, not some praise sandwich or something like that. Just 1:1 is more than enough. But there are times when there is nothing to praise. What do you do when it's more than apparent that whatever someone is showing you is not up to the mark? Now you're going to have to ferret out praise. You're supposed to somehow extract it, and there's nothing much to praise. How do we go about it? Let's say you go to the cafe every day. You order your coffee, it comes to the table, and then you savor it. You're not just one of those coffee drinkers who want a hot drink. You want the coffee to be perfect. Just the right acidity, perfect cream, and an espresso, because what else would a coffee specialist drink? You have just one problem. The coffee is perfect, yet again. The weather and humidity has changed. The beans aren't always consistent. Even so, your barista is a witch. She turns out perfect coffee no matter what. You've complimented her on the coffee a few days ago, but what will you do today? Should you compliment her today, and then tomorrow, and then what about the next 365 days? This kind of praise problem seems hard to solve. We feel that praise is valuable because it's restricted. If we start praising continuously, we think that it loses its value. Firstly, that's not true. You can praise someone frequently, and they will still feel that warm glow of happiness. People are excellent judges of insincerity versus genuine praise. And even if you're just flattering someone, they will still lap it up. But most of us can detect when someone is not being honest. Hence, praise can be given every single time, all the time if needed. When a 2-year-old does a terrible drawing, we don't hold back the praise. Instead, we admire the drawing and we put it up on the fridge, we put it up in a frame, and then another drawing may follow and it seems to receive the same amount of adoration. Even a young child can tell if the parent is genuinely interested because Parents are totally absorbed with everything that the child does. So they soak in the praise. However, there are times when you can't necessarily praise someone. Beginners fall into this category. For example, if someone is learning to write an article, their work is what you'd expect a beginner to do. It's not very well structured, it has little drama, and generally it's hard to praise. Trying to find something, anything to praise, would be complicated. Moreover, if you see something worthwhile, it's hard to keep up the act day after day. It takes some time for the writer to reach the point where at least parts of the article may be worthy of your praise. The fastest way out of this mess is to ask questions. Remember that praise, precise, detailed praise, is lovely. However, the second best method is to show interest. If you ask the person how they went about the task, they will answer in enough detail. Keep asking questions because what it's showing is that you're interested. Praise builds confidence, but when you ask questions, they realize that you want to know more. In its own way, it's a form of praise. The second method, if you can pull it off, is to follow a structure. In the article writing course especially, I run into this problem as a teacher. The big reason why people join the course is because they want to write articles quickly. But they also want to write it very well. However, because they're still learning, they turn out articles that may often resemble the 2-year-old's drawings. The way they try to solve the problem is by editing. They spend hours trying to fix an article that cannot be fixed. Hence, I set benchmarks for them. The first benchmark is time. They get a fixed time for each assignment, and if they meet that time, they get praise. They also get benchmarks for what must be done in that particular assignment. For example, let's say they have to tell a story, and the story has many parts, but during the week, we're focused on the first line. I tend to ignore the rest of the story, no matter how good it is or bad. And then I focus on the quality of the first line. In doing so, the writer soon understands what is expected of them. They realize that if they take 2 hours for a 45-minute assignment, well, they will get no praise. If they write a remarkable story, but the first line is ragged, the praise isn't forthcoming either. So all of this praise is based on benchmarks. If you do this, you get praise. If you do that, you don't get praise. People learn that very quickly. If you have the benchmarks and you put the benchmarks out there and they know what the benchmarks are and how to achieve those benchmarks, they will go specifically for the benchmarks. And when you praise them, they will do more of what you want them to do. This avoids the desire also to go after this perfection thing that people talk about. And in the course itself, the writer improves in steady steps. Not all situations warrant praise. However, it's important to note that the opposite of praise can just be indifference. When you ask questions or you set up benchmarks, you let the person know that you're interested in their actions. Both the learner and you know that the work is going to be clumsy for now. However, as long as they get acknowledged, they will be willing to move ahead. More importantly, they will respect how you're handling them, despite the fact that they're still struggling. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Let's do a little summary. The first point that we covered was detail. Detail matters. Praise needn't cover 10 points. If anything, dig deeper into a single point so that the person receiving the praise realizes the importance of that singular point. Just like I got this praise from Sarah on movement in the photographs. And now I look for that. I look to create movement. If you're just used to saying cool or good work, that's nice, but it's often pointless. Detail doesn't have to be a chapter long. A few lines will have the impact it needs, but a paragraph is often better. And when you have that option to just put a like because it's nice and lazy, well, stop yourself and say, maybe I should put a like, but maybe, just maybe, I should talk about this just in a little detail. The second point that we covered was the praise sandwich. A praise sandwich is saying something good and then something that's critical and then finishing with something praiseworthy. Once again, it's nice, but the formula doesn't do the person any good. When someone asks for criticism, they really want praise. And the best praise that you can give is just that ratio of 1:1. I mean, you can go 3:3 and 5:5 and 7:7, but it's really hard to cope with so much information. So 1:1 is probably the best way. You tell them, this is the stuff that you have to fix. It's an easy fix. And this is what you did really well. And then go into detail. And they'll come back to you. That's how you know, because they will keep coming back to you for more feedback. And finally, what do you do when there's nothing to praise? A beginner acts like a beginner. There's not a lot you can say that is praiseworthy. It's hard to go on and on about something that really is pretty bad. Just average. However, praise is not all about kudos. Praise can also be about your interest in someone's work. Asking them questions allows them to explain their process, but it shows your interest in their work. That causes the person to get encouraged, and even when they're not particularly good at something, they realize that you're interested. Ask questions. Be interested. It's often the best thing you can do when there's no option for giving wholehearted praise. So what's the one thing you can do? I think you should get some paper. It really matters when you have paper. I mean, it's great to do digital stuff, but people keep paper. It could be just a scrap of paper. It could be a Post-it. The other day when I went to the cafe, I gave the barista a little thank you on the back of a napkin. I'm sure she didn't throw it in the bin shortly after. I mean, she got the thanks, she got that praise, and she kept that. So paper, whether it's a postcard or a Post-it or just about anything, matters. And I think that's the one thing that you can do today. Somehow get yourself some Post-its and maybe take them in your pocket and then hand them out to people as you go around praising them. Or get some postcards like we do, and we send it out to people all over the place. And that's what you can do as well. So that's the one thing you can do. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Let's find out what's happening in Psychotactics land. You've probably heard about how information products change the way clients perceive you, haven't you? If you and I read a book and we like the author and we like how they think, then we go on to buy more stuff from them, more information products. And the core of an information product isn't that you're putting together more information. If you look on Amazon, there are millions of books and there will be trillions of them, and it doesn't make any difference. What matters is that you're able to get the client to keep reading, often till the very end. How many of us just abandon books, abandon reports, abandon information because we don't get to the very end? Like you are right now at this podcast at the very end. What is it that holds that information product together? And this is what you'll learn in this course. It's not cheap. In fact, it's one of the more expensive courses. But on Feb the 24th, that's when you get access to it. But you can get some goodies in advance. So go to psychotactics.com/info goodies. And yeah, that's where you get the goodies. And that's where you get to judge whether what you're about to buy is worth your time and your money. On the other hand, and going off on a complete tangent, there's also the workshop. We're having a workshop on how to photograph strangers. Now, the concepts that you're going to learn in how to photograph strangers is probably similar to how to photograph anything like your desk. Not that you want to photograph your desk. But strangers are the hardest thing to photograph because they're always moving, because they don't like being photographed. Yet I've taken over 30,000 photos of them in the last 2 years, and people say, come back again. They say, please come back. How do we do this? It's a bit about photography. It's a bit about psychology. And yes, it's also a bit of marketing. So you'll learn how to do that. We're having a workshop in Portugal. It's just for 6 people. So go into Psychotactics and type Portugal workshop, and that's where it'll pop up. We're also going to have some meetups in Portugal and in Singapore and in Munich. All the events are listed on the Psychotactics website. Have a look right now, and you'll find where we are and at what day and time. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in 5000 BC. You've heard of 5000 BC, haven't you? Bye-bye.